We are in Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, about 15 lines from the bottom. We said we're still talking about Shavuos ha'edus, when someone denies knowing edus and he makes a shvuah. So he said, "B'zeh hazeh harishon chayiv v'hasheni pater." If you have two edim and one says edus, he denies knowing edus and he's lying, and then the second one does the same thing. Only the first one is chayiv, but not the second one. We had said before that they're both going to be chayiv if they do it at the same time. We said either because Rabbi Yosef Glili says because Efshel and Samson both could do it at the same time, or you say they do it Tech Kadei Dibur. But if they're not at the same time, if it's one after the other, once the first has already said that he doesn't know any edus, the second one is not going to be able to say edus. He's only a single aid, so a single aid can't cause money to be paid. So therefore, the first one already took himself out of the edus. So therefore, the second one is going to be pot. So the Tanya. This is clearly not like Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says even an eid echad is chayiv a Shavuos ha'edus. So he's not concerned about the fact that an eid echad, it would seem theoretically an eid echad should be able to be mitzi mammon. Like we said from the beginning of this parak, the edus, a Shavuos edus, is only if the person was able to say valid edus that would actually be able to be effective in causing mammon to be given or not given, whatever the case may be, but to be valid as far as mammon is concerned. But eid echad we normally say is not valid for edus. Let's say the reason why Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says even an eid echad is an chayiv Shavuos edus, the masav eid echad ki asa l'shvu hu dekasa, masav eid echad ki asa l'mayna kasa. One man Amar says all an eid echad could do is cause the other. Let's say if Reuben is asking Shimon for money, and Shimon denies it, if an eid echad comes and says that Shimon owes the money, that Shimon has to make a shvuah. So in that case, the eid echad is not actually causing money to change hands, so therefore he would not be mechayiv Shavuos edus. But other man Amar holds an eid echad could actually cause Shimon to have to pay. This is different than what we've always heard, right? You look very shocked. This is Amanda Amar who holds that an eid echad could be mitzi mammon. The Torah says, when the Torah says that he can't be making an edus api eid echad api shnai edim yakum davar, that means only for dinei iser, for ben adam l'makom, but for mammonus an eid echad is sufficient according to this mandam. Zok Gemara, the Tizba Amar Abai Hakom Moedim Be'ed Saita. Hakom Moedim Be'ed Saita. Machloikas Be'ed Saita. Hakom Moedim Be'ed Echad. Hakom Moedim Be'ed Shekeneg Le'Chashad Al Shvuah. Abai says these 5 statements. He says about this machloikas between Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon and the Tanakama that we had brought, whether eid echad could make a shvuah. We say that on these 5 things, you come to that machlekes. They'll both agree in one case of an eid site, and they'll both agree in a case of 2 eidim by saita, and they'll have a machlekes in one particular case where there's 2 eidim of saita, and they both agree on one case of eid echad, and they both agree on an eid shekeneg le'chad shchashel al shvuah, where one aid is not able to swear, where he can't swear because he's the person, one of the parties is a gazlan and therefore can't swear. And the Gemara is going to explain it in a minute, and we're also going to explain in a minute how this proves that the machlekes Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon and the Chachamim is not about whether an eid echad could be mitzi mammon, but it's talking about a different thing. So Zok Dumar. We're going to retract from what we said. Certainly in eid echad, all it can do is make someone make a shvuah. Nobody is saying that an eid echad can be mitzi mammon. Ma'asav adavar germ l'mammon dami, u'ma'asav alav k'mammon dami. The machlekes between the Tanakam and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon where Rabbi Elazar Shimon says you could be chayiv, even an eid echad could be chayiv as a Shavuos ha'edus, is that machlokes is based on the question of whether when an eid echad says edus and he causes the other party, let's say Reuven says Shimon owes him money, and Reuven produces an eid echad, and now Shimon has to swear. It's very likely, as we all know, you're not really supposed to make a shvuah. So it's very likely that Shimon will refuse to swear and just pay up. So although the eid echad is not directly causing Shimon to pay, but he's indirectly, by causing him to swear, he's very likely causing him to pay money. So Reb Shimon ben Elazar holds that's enough to make him mechayev in the carbon of a Shavuos edus if he swore falsely that he doesn't know edus, even though he's just an eid echad. The Tanna Kama disagrees. He says lav kamaman dami, unless the eid echad he's being required, he's being asked to say his edus, and he lies and says he doesn't know the edus. Unless that aid could have actually been Maitzi Mammon, he's not going to be Mechayev a Shavuos Edus. He's not going to be Mechayev to bring a carbon for making a false Shavuos Edus. Now the Gemara is going to go back and explain how this statement of Abaya, how it's understood, and how it shows that their machlokes is not legabi whether an eid echad can be Maitzi Mammon, but rather whether a davar agarm l'mammon is commanded. Gufa, Amar Abaya. Hakol moedim be'ed saita, hakol moedim be'ed saita, machlokes be'ed saita, hakol moedim be'ed echad, hakol moedim be'ed sheknegdei chashal shua. We're just repeating Abaya's statement, except for that he switches around the order of the eid echad, the last two things. So we say hakol moedim be'ed saita shechayev. What does it mean when we say that everyone agrees by an eid saita, by a single eid saita, that you're going to be chayev? It's talking about an eid tumah. That's talking about where there are three different times that you need edus, or there are two times you always need edus by saita, and one potential time you can need edus. The first part of kinoi, you need two edim to testify that they saw let's say the husband warning his wife not to be secluded with someone who he thinks is an adulterer, who he thinks she's hanging around with too much. So you need two Eidim. The Torah says you need two Eidim for that. Then you need two Eidim for stira. Afterwards, he has to bring two Eidim. They secluded themselves in spite of the kinoi, in spite of him saying that they shouldn't do so. That's also required by the pasuk. This is Gemara, and back in Saita, the Gemara went through this at length. And finally, if the man brings a single aid that he wasn't just secluded with her, but he was actually born her, which is an aid tumah, and they only need one aid at that point. If he has a single aid, it's obvious a single aid is not enough for her to be killed as an Eishes Ish, but for being Mizana, but it's enough that the husband now, she can divorce her, she doesn't drink the Mei Saita, he divorces her and he doesn't have to pay the Ksuba. We learn out, the Torah says that since we have all this background, that he gave her kinoi, and she went and did stira, both of these things with two Eidim. If now there's a single aid that he was born her, then this man can be mitzi, he has mechayev to be mitzi his wife, and he doesn't have to pay her ksuba. So we say, so hakom eid meitzaita shechayev be'eid tumah. So that's talking about that single aid. The Rachmana hemnei. The Rachmana believe, the Torah says we believe a single aid under those circumstances. The Chsev ve'eid einba, kol sheyeshba. Says ve'eid einba, there's not even an aid, but if there is one, that's enough. Okay. So if you have such an aid, a single aid, and he would be the aid tuma, and the husband says, I want you to come testify, and he declines to do, he lies, and he says he doesn't know Eidus, that's going to be mechuyev. Abai is saying he's going to be mechuyev a Shavuos Eidus, and he's going to have to bring a carbon leviyared if he's lying. Then continues the next thing that Abai said. V'akol moedim be'edei saita, with two edim. Shepato be'edei kinoi. The edim of kinoi, the edim that are coming to say that the husband said, don't go beseiser yourself, don't seclude yourself with this man. On that you need two Eidim. And if those two Eidim lie and say that they don't know the Eidus, in that case, everyone's going to agree they're not going to be Mechuyev Shavuos Eidus, because that could not have resulted in loss of money. That means what it could have done is it would have made it that if there's a stira, then he would lose his ability, because if they would have said the truth, then there would have been kinoi. And then if there's later a stira, and then she drinks the mei saita, he would have been potter. He wouldn't have to pay his ksuba when he divorces her. But that's very far-fetched. So be'edikina to have a goyrim de goyrim. Since first of all, after the kina you need a stira, and then after the stira she has to drink the mei saita. So that is not something that we can expect. We can expect to happen. So that's not. Everyone will agree that that's not considered that the Eidim would have cost him money. Umachloikas be'edei saita, be'edei sit. That's talking about be'edei stira. If you have two Eidim of stira, marsav adavar germ l'mam k'mam dami, marsav adlav k'mam dami upater. One man was holds since it's when you have the Eidei Stiris, it's only one step away. If she decides she's not going to drink the Mesaita, then he could be megarish her without ksuba. So according to Elazar of Shimon, who says Yechayev by an Eid Echad, because he says a Dava Hagarm Lamamin is Kamamandami, he'll also say over here by Eidei Saita, by Eidei Stira. Since it's only a davar hagar l'mammon, it's one step away from being mechayev mammon. But there's a chance if the aid would have said what he was requested to say, it would have caused her to lose money. So therefore, according to B'Shimon Yechayev, but the Chachamim who disagree, like we had the disagreement Lagabi and Eid Echad, would say Yepater because it's only a davar hagar l'mammon. Then so that's the raya. So you see that the machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and Shimon and the Chacham is not based on whether an Eid Echad can be Moitzi Mammon, but it's based on this different question of whether Davar Garm L'Mammon is Kamam and Dami, like we had suggested. So we're finally getting back to what the Gemara had brought Abaye for. But we continue explaining Abaye. Hakol Moedim b'kashinagdoi chasher al hashvua. We said, if one of the parties can't make a shvua, and Hakol Moedim Eid Echad, the Rav Abba. So we're going to explain, everyone agrees by the Eid Echad of Rav Abba. So we're going to explain those two things. Hakol Moedim b'kashinagdoi chasher al hashvua. The chashed man, who is chashed? Elam and the chashed loiva. We're talking about a case, a standard case, where Ruvain says, Shimon owes me money. I lent money to Shimon, and Shimon denies it. So if Reuven has an Eid Echad that could say that Shimon owes the money, and that would normally cause Shimon to make a shvuah. But the problem is Shimon is a gazlan, so therefore he's not able to make a shvuah. A chashed ala shvuah can't make a shvuah. The Amalei Malva, in that case, the Malva says to the aid, Yas sadali hamishtabana v'shakilna. So in that case, what happens is if the loiva is unable to make a shvuah, then the shvuah goes back to the Malva, to Reuven. So Reuven tells the aid, if you were to say your edus, then I can make a shvuah and I could take the money from Shimon. Since Shimon, normally the nitva, the loiv is the one who swears, not that he doesn't have to pay money. But in this case, since the loiv can't swear, therefore the malva swears. And so the malva is telling his aid, if you were to come, then I would be able to take money by making a shvuah. So the the aid can say back to the malva. It's one thing for the aid to say that a davar garim l'mammon. When the aid is forcing someone to swear, we say normally a person doesn't want to swear. But over here, the malva is saying, if you would come and say this, then I would swear. People normally are not supposed to swear. If you're a good Jew, even if you're losing money, it's better not to make a shvua. So the Eid Echad could tell him, listen, don't say I'm a Gairim Lamamin, because you have to swear in order to get money, and you probably won't want to swear. So we're talking about not a case where the loiva is the chashud, but both the loiva and the malva can't swear. The amar that's the reason why the Eid Echad is going to be chayiv for a Shavuos Eidus if he declines to say his Eidus, where it's just an Eid Echad. We're talking about a case where both the loiva and the malva are chashud al Shavuos. So therefore, the loiva, he goes to normally the way it works is the loiva has to make a shvua, but he can't swear because he's a gazan. So then the shvua goes to the malva. The malva says, I also can't swear. So it goes back to the loiva, and since the loiva can't swear, he has to pay. So that is why the Eid Echad in that case will milchayiv a carbon as a Shavuos Eidus if he lies about not knowing the Eidus. And finally, Hakol Meidim Eid Echad the Rabava. What's the case of Rabava? The Hu Gavra the Chotef Naska, the famous Naska the Rabava. There was this man that grabbed a hunk of silver. Mechavre. Also Kamei the Rav Ami. Reuven grabbed a hunk of silver from Shimon. Also Kamei the Rav Ami. Shimon went to Rav Ami and said, Reuven took a hunk of silver from me. Haviyasa Rav Abba Kamei, and Rav Abba was sitting together with the Rav Ami. Azal Aisi Chad Sada the Michtav Chatchumine. And Reuven brought an aid that Shimon took the hunk of silver from him. Amalei in Chatvi v'didi Chatvi. And Shimon said, yeah, I took the hunk of silver, but it was mine. I had lent it to Reuven, and now I wanted it back. What should we pass in such a case? L'shalem, do we say that Shimon has to pay back the Naska Lekatrei Sadi? There's no, Reuven doesn't have two aid, he only has one aid. You can't be Moitzi Mammon with one aid. Lifter, should we say that Shimon doesn't have to give back the hunk of silver? But when there's a single aid, and the aid requires something. So what does the aid require? He should make a shvua, lishtaba. Since Shimon said, I did take it, so he's like a gazlan. Rashi says what it means, like he's like a gazlan. It doesn't mean that he's like a gazlan, that he's a chashad al shvua. He's saying he's like a gazlan in the sense, just like a gazlan who's chassid al shvua and can't swear. Therefore, the shvua goes back on the other person. So too over here, this person is not able to swear because he's admitting that he took the other person's. That Shimon's admitting that he took the naska from Reuven. He's just saying that it was justified. So he's. What kind of shvua is he going to make? He's going to make he can't make a shvua that it was his originally. That's not what he's being told. It's being said is that you took it away from me. So that he fully admits to. So there's no shvua for him to make on that. So therefore, Shimon is someone who's responsible to make a shvua, and he's unable to swear. So therefore, Mishalim, therefore he has to pay. So this is what Abaye was saying in such a case. Since this shvua will require, this Eid Echad will require shvua that the person who grabbed the naska is unable to make, and therefore he's going to have to pay. So that's a case of an Eid Echad, that if he denies knowing the Eidus, he's going to bring a carbon Eidus, because he's not just requiring a shvua, he's actually requiring payment. And he's being Maitzi Mammon al Yedei this Eid Echad. Amar Papa, Hakol Moedim be'eid Misa Shu Chayev, Hakol Moedim be'Misa Shu Pater. The Papa adds on to Abaye's 5 things. He says another 2 cases where Reb Shimon Elazar and the Chachamim would disagree. Would agree. I'm sorry. Well, they both agree in one case of an Eid Misa that you chayev, one case of Misa that you pater. What does that mean? Be'eid Misa. We're talking about a woman who is claiming that her husband died, and she wants to get from his possessions, from his karka. She wants to be Maitzi Ksuba. So the woman shows up saying, I was away in Medina Sayyam, and my husband died, and I want to be gaiva my ksuba. So Hakol Moed made Misashu Pater. If there's a single aid that says that he died, and the woman is bringing him the Amala L'Dida If the aide said to her, to the Isha, your husband, the woman herself doesn't know, but he said to the Isha that your husband died, but he's not willing to testify in Bezdin. He disappears before Bezdin can bring him in. In that case, the woman is believed. It's an unusual din, but if back in when we learned Ksubis, a woman is believed to say her husband died. Like we say, there's a woman doesn't want to make herself. She's not going to put herself in a position where she says her husband dies and then she remarries and then her husband shows up and she turns out to be a Zaina and her children are mamzerim. So a woman is very leery about stating her husband dies unless she knows he actually died. So therefore, she's even believed if she says not just that she knows that he died, but even if she says that someone told me that he died, that's enough for her to get the ksuba and to remarry. So we're saying since this person told her that her husband died, that's going to be enough for her to get her ksuba. The Tanana Isha Amra Meis Baili Tinasit. Meis Baili Tisyabin. So a woman has believed, even if she says that my husband died because I heard from an aide, or so she can remarry, and she could be mizyabim to his brother. And then we say Akol Moedim Be'ed Misa Shu Chayiv, but there is a case of an aid Misa that she's going to be Chayiv, Deloy Amali Didav Loy Amalu Lebezdin, where the aide only told her, I know whether your husband died, but he didn't say what happened. And then or she says, I know that you know whether my husband died. And the aide says, no, I don't. And the aide runs away and he makes a shvua that he doesn't know. But it turns out later on that he did know that the husband died. So he didn't even tell her that her husband died. So that's a case of an aide echad that could have been enabled her to be Maitzia Ksuba, but by lying and saying he didn't know the Eidus when he really did, he made it impossible for her, he didn't even say the Eidus to her where she could have repeated it. So therefore, in that case, he's going to be Chayiv because he made it that she wasn't able to get her Ksuba. So this seems to prove that there's a question about whether you can make a Shavuos Eidus on Karka, because there's going to be a Gemara later on. The Gemara says, has a machlokes, asked the question whether Eidei Karka can be Mechuyev Shavuos Eidus. So l'chayra, when a woman collects her ksuba, she collects from the Karka of her husband. So you seem to see that you say Shavuos Eidus even on Karka. No, this is not a raya. Dilma de Tfisa Metaltali. Now we're talking about a case where she had already grabbed metaltal, and in that case, if she could prove her case that she's entitled to ksuba, once she grabbed the metaltal, she could even collect from metaltal. So it's not necessarily implicating karka. We don't have a riot to the question of whether you make a shavuos eidus on karka. The Mishnah continued and said, "Kafar echad v'hoida echad." If one aide said, "I don't know the eidus," so he's the one who really would be, who could theoretically be mechoyev shavuos eidus, and the other one said, "No, I'm." And the other aide said he's ready to be made. The one who said he doesn't know, he's going to be mechoyev shavuos eidus, because if he would join with the other aide, that would be able to be moitzi mam. If we were machadish before that the Mishnah is like Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon, and he says that even when it's zeh achazeh, where both of them are denying knowing it. So the second aid, when the first one came and said it, it's already not possible for I'm sorry, a Mishnah not like Rabbi Elazar Shimon. We said it where the first one already was kaifer, and he said, I don't know any edus. And the second one is coming, we said that he's too late, because since the second one's useless, he's only in eid echad, so therefore he's going to be potter. We said, Amr Harishan Chayav Hasheni Potter, Kafar Echad V'Haida Echad Mibaya. Do we have to say where one was kaifer and the other one was haida? Certainly in that case, the Haida, the Kaifer is going to be Chayiv. There was certainly the one, if we said that the first one, if we said that by the first case of Bezeh Chazeh, we say that the first one is going to be Chayiv, even though the second was Kaifer. So certainly where the second was Maida, you're going to be Chayiv. Because then he could join with him. We're talking about where both of them were Kaifer originally. And the other one was, and one of them was what changed his mind before a Teich Kedei Dibur expired from the end of his being Kaifer. And he said, you know what? I do really know the Edis. And all is telling you, Teich Kedei Dibur Kedei Dibur. It's coming to tell you that a person could be Chayzer with a Teich Kedei Dibur. Einachanami, the other mandamar is not, the other aid is not an issue. The issue that we're trying to bring in the Mishnah is Bezeh Chazeh, if one of them was, where Kafar Echad v'Haida Echad, if the Haida Echad changed his mind, he originally was Kaifer, just like Kaifer Zeh Chazeh. That Kaifer was really first Kaifer, and then he changed his mind to be Haida, that it's going to be considered a Haida. So the first din of the Mishnah is telling you Efshel Tzamtzim. The Sevet Shechlashmin and Teich Kedei Dibur Kedibur. And this, what we're saying now, this part of the Mishnah is telling you Teich Kedei Dibur Kedibur. Rabbi Yochanan explained the reason, the Chiddush of Zeh Chazeh is talking about where they both said it Teich Kedei Dibur. Reisha Teich Kedei Dibur, Sefer Teich Kedei Dibur. They're both telling you the same din. The Reisha is talking about where it was Teich Kedei Dibur, and that's why we treat it as if that they're both going to be Chayiv, because Teich Kedei Dibur. And now we're saying the second din is saying that if someone was Chayiv, change his mind, Teich Kedei Dibur is old, he's Chayiv, he's going to be Chayiv. He's going to be, not going to be Chayiv, he's going to be Potter, he's going to be considered Aidah. Tati Lamali, why would the Mishnah have to say the same din twice? So in the beginning, when we said Teich Kedei Dibur, we're saying Lagabe, if one says I'm Kaifer, and then the other was Kaifer within Teich Kedei Dibur, then we say that they're both considered to have said at the same time, and therefore they're going to be both be chayiv. So that's one din. That's one Teich Kedei Dibur. That's one type of Teich Kedei Dibur. This is a different type of Teich Kedei Dibur. Al Kvir Aidah, where one said where a man said he was kaifer, and then he switched it to Aidah to say he could override what he had said originally because of Teich Kedei Dibur. That's a different din than saying two people who had said something are considered to have said it at the same time. Maybe you don't say Teich Kedei Dibur for that purpose. Kamash Malah. That's what the Mishnah is coming to tell you. Let's just go to the Mishnah so that and then I'll let you go so you can make it to davening. There were two kitim, there were two groups of Edim. The Mishnah says there were two Edim, two groups of Edim. The first one was Kaifer, and then afterwards the second was Kaifer. Second one, Bishlam is Shiyat is Chayav the Kafar Rishayna. I can understand why the second group is chayiv, because the first group had denied knowing the edus, so therefore the second group is necessary. Ela Rishayna, Amai Al Rishayna Kaim Shnia. Why should the first group be chayiv for denying knowing the edus? We still have a second group, so they're not necessary to be mitzi the mom. There's a whole other set of edim that could do it. Amar Ravina Hachmayaskin and Gancha Haisa Shnia B'Shas Kfiris Rishayna Krayvim Bin Shaysein. We're talking about at the time that the first group testified, the second two Edim were brothers-in-law. That means their wives were sisters, and therefore they were Krayvim, and they couldn't testify together as Edim. And their wives, but one of the wives was about to die. She was a Geisis. I might say that since the second pair of Edim is certainly going to be able to they're going to be able to say their edus as soon as the wife dies, so that they're no longer related. They're only brothers-in-law because their wives are sisters. But once the wife dies, then they're no longer going to be related, and therefore they'll be able to say the edus. Kamash Malan, that at this point, right now, this second set of edim are not valid edims. So therefore, the first set, when they lie about not knowing the edus, they're going to be mechayev b'shuas edus. It doesn't help them the fact that shortly the second pair of edim is going to become legitimate edim, because they're going to be kosher edim when the wife dies. Okay, we'll stop over here. Yasher Kayach, you saved the whole thing today.